Says we are live. Need to check.
We are, yes. Are we?
Yeah, it seems like.
Is it not? Hold on, I'm checking. Is it? Okay, we are live on YouTube. Facebook. Oh yes, we are live. We are live now. Right, welcome everybody to like the first Ruby Tuesday of 2021. So today we have me and Gui from Penang and Tristan as well. Yeah, let's go through like the usual keynote first, then we can jump into like some of the talks we have for today. Right. So as always, Ruby Tuesday brought to you by Engineers MY. Thanks to them, we have StreamYard and also KL Ruby Brigade and Ruby Penang. So if you're not already on our Facebook group, come and join us. Most of the activities are there. People post job posting there as well. So if you're looking for a job for Ruby, feel free to hang out in the Facebook group. Meetup is where we post all the information about our events. So make sure you follow us there as well. GitHub, mostly code related, and as well as presentations from these sessions tend to be there as well. Definitely join Slack. That's where most of the time we hang out. And we use Discord whenever there's a code clinic. Okay, so I'm Gui. It's very similar pronunciation to Gui from Penang. So yeah, Tristan does have a hard time when he talks to us. Okay, reminder, anyone watching us on Facebook or YouTube or even Twitch, right? Feel free to give us chat. We're definitely monitoring chat. So yeah, if you have any questions or any comments, feel free to type it in the live chat. Okay, do we have any hiring shoutouts this week?
I don't see anything. Super Hands, I guess, have been reaching out and probably would like to hire a few developers. So that's from. I mean, I don't know if they reach out to any of you, but so this is probably an unofficial job posting. But I do know Super Hands had been on a recruiting spree for Ruby and Rails developers.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of job postings tends to come through Facebook. So again, if anybody's interested, join our Facebook group and check the postings out. Okay, let's move to the first talk today. We have Tristan and Gui talking about Ruby 3 running on M1, like how is it, what's breaking, as well as Ruby 3 static types. So I'll let, I guess, Tristan take away first.
Sure, yeah, I will add this to the stream. And you can see here this is the basically when you just installed Rails, right? And you run Rails S, you'll see here that the Ruby version is 3.0.0. So yes, Ruby 3 runs on the M1 as well. And this is the ARM64 version, so compiled ARM64, and the Rails version is 6.1.0. Most of the more recent builds work, but we'll go into the gotchas in a bit as well. So let me go to that page. Where is that? Yeah. So this is a big resource. It was written in 30th of June for Darwin 20. So this is the ARM64 version, and M1 is basically an ARM processor, even though it's slightly different, but still ARM. The some of the things here, like libFFI being broken, had already been fixed. So the PRs that this person was talking about is already there. But what you actually do need is something called Ruby install in order to get things working. At least this is how I got things to work, because I'm using RVM myself, and using RVM for the Ruby compilation does not always work. Especially for like what I'm using, the 2.7.2, for example. So the way that RVM installs 2.7.2 on Darwin on ARM64 is not compatible with ARM64. And so the way I do it was with Ruby install. And because I want to use RVM for switching, then I use this particular invocation, ruby-install ruby's dir, which is the default directory for Ruby's installed by RVM, and then the version. So it's Ruby 3.0.0, for example, right? If you're using RBN, I don't think the RBN Ruby installer also works correctly. So you'll have to just change the install directory. After you've installed Ruby with this, you can just do RVM use 3.0, for example, or 3, and it's going to use the Ruby that was installed. So I'm going to actually share my full screen um, instead of just a window, so you can see there. All right. So for example, here's the uh, Ruby that is running. So if I do which Ruby, for example, this is the Ruby version that I did. I've already done the installation of Ruby. What is difficult though? So Ruby actually works great. Um, Ruby-V, for example, Ruby is the ARM64 version, right? The problem here is that on Ruby 5, 6, especially Ruby 6, where it depends on Webpack and for asset compilation. So Sprockets is gone now from a certain point in Ruby 6. Uh, you need to compile Node.js, and Node.js does not compile correctly on ARM64 on versions below version 15. So what do I have right here? So you'll see here I have a few versions. The project that I'm with is version 8, and there, like, I just installed 15 a few hours ago, and then there's also version 10. So 15 compiles natively. So if I nvm use 15, then which node dash v. So this is the 15 one. This one gets compiled correctly in ARM64. But if you're using 10, for example, or 8, the problem there is it does not compile on ARM64, and so you are going to do something called um, x86 emulation on here. So the way you do this is, so for example, so here's a screenshot, by the way, of me. No, this is 10 of me compiling NVM Node version 15. So you'll see that like full CPU, and then this is like it's getting very hot because this is just a MacBook Air without a fan. It took maybe like 30 minutes to compile the whole Node 15. But if you want to compile versions of Node below 15, then you do something like, so I use iterm. You'll have to duplicate iterm. So you do like you copy and paste this. So something like copy paste. We have a copy. I'm going to just delete this because I've already deleted it. Or you can duplicate, for example. And then you right click on it or get info, and then you click on open using Rosetta. Rosetta is the translation layer. So when you actually run it, this is going to be running in Rosetta mode, and then you can start compiling things because now it can enable x86 emulation. So when you bring up the activity monitor, you'll see here that on the architecture, so I've had it sorted by architecture. Some of them, like for example, Messenger, Viber, this is iterm2, which is running on the Intel architecture. And you can have an iterm, where's my other iterm? HMI. So you'll have two iterms. One is the Apple architecture, which is the default that I'm using, and the Intel architecture. So which enables you to compile and bring in like the libraries of these things. The best thing about that here is that even if you install libraries for Intel on the x86, as soon as you um, use the other terminal, which is runs on Apple, if it's already installed, if the libraries are already installed, then it will automatically run the Intel versions. So at this point, I have Ruby running natively on ARM64, and all of my JavaScripts, the Node.js, basically the compilation node, happens on Intel on the same terminal. And there are a few, yeah, caveats. So basically, you have to install like Ruby, and you have to do Ruby install. Basically, like get like follow the instructions here, but not necessarily the live flags, because these flags are not required anymore, like the FFI closure alloc, etc. Because this has been already included in the Ruby install. And yeah, and then wait for some compilation to be done when you're using NV Node version 15, because it takes a really long time to compile it. Yeah, and that's actually what I've done so far. There are a few packages in Ruby that needs um, that need native libraries that are not available on the ARM64 platform on the M1, but most of the newer gems already work around that. Like for example, Puma 4 does not compile correctly, but Puma 5 does. There's another one. I think Ruby Racer does not work correctly so far. But you don't really need Ruby Racer if you have Node installed on the same system. So you don't need it. You don't even need Live V8 anymore, because Rails basically just delegates asset compilation uh, to Webpack anyway. So yeah, it's a short presentation. If you any of you have any questions who are watching, I think I'll be staying here and then watching the comments, and then when we get back, I will answer them. Like, I don't know, I'm not sure what other questions you have, but if so, as a conclusion, I guess, right? If you are going to be getting the M1 Mac for your work, it's great as a mobile device to carry around, to just like move around, because it's very light. Even if it's very hot, I showed you the temperatures, it's 100 degrees, but it's still a laptop. You can still put it on your lap. Even though this MacBook Air does not have a fan, it's still okay. Like, it's not that bad. And I would recommend that you upgrade to 16 gigs, especially if you're doing web development work, just so that you ease up on the SSD file swapping. So if you'll see, I was already at like half of the memory, but some things have already swapped as well. But I wouldn't recommend it as your primary machine until all of these small details have been ironed out, because it can be very frustrating, especially if you have a deadline. So I wouldn't recommend it for prime time. You should still have a backup machine that you can work on. But if you'd like a really nice work laptop that can do some things, like maybe 90% of the work that you need to do, then yes, get the 16 gig MacBook Air or MacBook Pro. But still, don't sell your old laptop yet, or at least you have a desktop, like have a Linux system or something lying around, so that you have a backup just in case things don't compile properly, because there are still a lot of rough edges on the M1. Yep. Again, any questions, just hit them up on Facebook or YouTube. We can see them and we'll respond to them later.
Right. I do have some question, Jason, before you go off.
Sure.
Did you try installing like the x86 like Ruby and Node just like that, or you straight away went with the ARM 64 build
Yeah,
of Ruby?
I didn't want to install the x86 versions because they have a performance hit. I haven't done the benchmarks, but I know that they have a performance hit, and I would rather use the native ones. And so what we've seen is that Ruby 3.0 is native to M1. You can compile Ruby 3.0 natively. It's just that the installers themselves, the compilers, the compiler uh, sequence or the invocation by RVM and RBN are not compatible with M1, because you need to have particular compiler flags. And so there is this. I'll probably put the link. It's the postmodern. I'll put it on the comments. It's the Ruby install by Postmodern in GitHub. And if you're using RVM or RBN to switch Rubies, you just install um, the resulting binary onto your Rubies folder, depending on the version manager that you're installing, and it will automatically like use that. So you can start using RVM use tree, for example, and then that's it.
All right. You mentioned something about Node earlier. So you had to compile. So you're saying only Node 15 works for the M1, and you have to
Node 15 compiles on the M1. Node 10 and Node 8 does not. And so you need to use the Intel version of Node 10 and Node 8. There are no existing binaries for the platform because if you have an existing binary, then NVM, which is the version manager I use, it automatically just downloads the binary, the precompiled binary, right? There are no precompiled binaries for the M1, and so you need to build it. You need from source. There are also no precompiled binaries for 10 and 8, the ones that I'm using anyway. I don't know about 12 and 14, but there are no precompiled binaries, so you need to build from source as well. But M1 and Node for 8 and 10 does not compile correctly on the M1, which is why you need to start using the Intel version, the x86 binaries. And in order to use the Intel x86 binaries, you have to be on Intel x86 mode, which is why you had to run iTerm or any of your terminals under x86 so that it will present itself as an x86 platform, and then Homebrew or um, uh, the compilers will present itself as x86. And by the way, Homebrew has the Homebrew version that is currently stable does not work on the M1. You have to install the beta version of Homebrew. I think I should also mention that because Homebrew is used for a lot of the compilation.
Yeah, I think most Mac developers would just use Homebrew for package management.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah,
So does it mean? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You need a beta version, not the stable version. So you can't use maybe it's the latest version. I'm not sure, but it's not the usual available version. Yep. Sorry, you had a question.
Does it mean that, like, for example, for because you mentioned something about Webpack earlier, which got into the whole Node.js thing? Does it mean, like, for example, if you want to run Webpack dev server, does Webpack dev server run in the x86 terminal, and then like your Rails runs
No.
in the?
So as soon as you install the Intel, so if the Intel binaries, as soon as they're present, you can run Intel or ARM in any terminal. So as long as you run the ARM64 terminal, it can run the Intel versions as well.
Right. Do you need to take that Rosetta 2 thing, or if it's like not tick, you will still run it as well?
It will run it. It's just that because it's already installed, right? So the binary is already installed. It's only when you need to identify to the compiler that this is architecture, because you in C or C++, right? You'll have your if def like definitions, like compile definitions, like what is the architecture. It needs to present itself as an x86 architecture so that all of the compiler flags actually are correctly chosen.
Right. Okay. Because I was like imagining you have to have both the x86 and the ARM
Yeah,
terminal running,
the
but
x86 is just a convenience, because there's also another command to switch the current terminal to identify itself as x86. But I just don't want to remember that. So I just created my own terminal that runs in Rosetta. So I don't have to remember that. I just know this icon that says in iTerm2 x86. I know it's in x86 mode. I rarely use it unless I need to compile something and it needs to be identified as x86. So So Homebrew is 2.6.0 right now. The one that has M1 support is 2.7.1. And so you'll need to use 2.7.1. You'll need to download it from GitHub. It's not on their page. You have to go to GitHub and then go to the releases and then download that. And that is the one that you can run without running Rosetta.
I guess I have two more questions. I guess the second to last one would be what sort of like encouraged you to get an M1 machine? Was it like because of the M1
Yeah,
processor
I
or?
wanted to try out the M1, but I'm not really a well. Before I got the M1, I was really an Apple fan, just because it's expensive. I'm kind of reevaluating my stance on that because this is a very nice machine in the sense that the performance I'm used to this because I have a Ryzen 3900X as my work laptop, right? So like that is loads way faster than this. But what I really like about this is the portability. It's very light. It's not noisy at all because there's no fan, and the battery life is really really good. So this laptop that I'm the 3900X, I basically have to like keep it plugged in every time I'm using it. The fans are very very loud, so I'm basically using it as a desktop replacement. This one I can move around. The battery, so I don't. I'll try to share my screen again. So the battery, if you can see, uh, let's see, battery preferences, usage history. So you'll see here from 9 to 12 is like about, and this is like doing work, right? I'm constantly doing work here, and um, to 12 to about like 2, I think, maybe. That's when I start needed to, like, I didn't need to charge, but I decided to charge it because of um, it was already around what 40%, and I charge it again. It's very very fast to charge, less than an hour, and then now I'm still using it without charging. So it's very very uh, the battery life is very good, and you basically if I'm not taxing this because I'm like recompiling node modules, for example, um, or I don't know, like running Rails or running like uh, battery guzzlers, then this should last like at least 2 days if all you're doing is just like typing articles or something. But as a development machine, like half a day without getting plugged in is very very good. So that those were things that I think are very attractive for a developer. Although still, I got the MacBook Air because I knew I am going to be giving it away to my mother anyway in the future. After like we start to get travel what do you call this, like travel restrictions lifted, because uh, she doesn't need a lot of the power. Like I didn't need a MacBook Pro, and I knew that this is like V1 of like an Apple product, and usually don't want to depend on the V1 a lot. Usually you have a lot of bugs to iron out. So I wanted to try it out. I wanted to experience the whole thing first, but I also know that I'm going to give it away and get a better version, like in the future when I get to like maybe when Apple announces the next version. So yeah, so
Right.
those are my motivations.
I'd definitely be interested. Like if you maybe how long have you had the machine for?
This was delivered to me December 31.
Oh, okay. So I guess around 2 weeks, a week more. It'll be interesting
It was
for you
only
to
the
like do
5th.
a
It's only like what, 6 days, less than
less
a
than a
week.
week. Less than a week. Yeah, less than a week. Yeah, I'm definitely interested. Like if you once you have more time with it, right, and in the future if you do a follow up talk on your experience, that'll be very very interesting as well.
Well, right now I've been using it like full time for work for the past week, and yeah, those are the biggest issues really. Nothing that other people haven't encountered yet. So
Mm.
so far, like people have been talking about like Stack Overflow. So you can just Google things, and um, usually you'll get the answers. Uh, but it's very difficult to predict what problems you will encounter without having the machine itself. That's the thing. And so, because every project is different. At least for my project, I needed to upgrade. I think, yeah, Puma and something else. I had to remove Ruby Racer. Yeah, so Puma and I had to remove Ruby Racer for it to like actually work, and of course the Node versions. Um, Google Cloud SDK, for example, you cannot install through Homebrew. You have to install using the download that they provide on like Google Cloud, like on the official download site. So Homebrew, the formula for Homebrew formula for Google Cloud SDK doesn't actually work. So aside from those, everything I needed for my work is working. One more thing, Docker. So I'll quickly share. Sorry for forgetting this. Um, I'll move this here again so that you don't see the. Yeah. So you'll see here that I actually have Docker running, but this is the where's Docker? Yeah. This is the technical preview of Docker. Docker technical preview. So the great thing about so you just go to the site. So basically you Google. I'll just post that here as well. You Google Docker M1 technical preview, and then you'll get like the instructions on how to install it. This is the only version of Docker that runs on the M1, and that allows me to run both Intel images and ARM images. So you'll see, for example, that I think MySQL, this is an Intel image. This does not have an ARM64. So if you go to docker.com, right, um, and you get Docker images, Docker Hub, sorry, Docker Hub, yeah, hub.docker.com. If you look at, let's say, MySQL, right, tags, you'll see that there are like the OS architecture. This is AMD 64. And what I tried, so another thing that I've tried is run Parallels, the technical preview for Parallels, install Ubuntu ARM64 on it, and then run Docker on Ubuntu ARM64. This cannot actually run, so that Ubuntu ARM64 cannot run AMD 64 images for Docker. Um, because it does not have the tag, like it's not built for that. But for example, if you go to MariaDB, you'll see that they have different architectures. You'll have the ARM64. I think this is for Chromebook, the V8, PPC, PowerPC architecture. So these tags, the architecture, so the images are different for each of these architectures. And that one, uh, Ubuntu for Ubuntu ARM64 can run this particular version, the Linux ARM64, right? But the Docker that is a technical preview for M1 can run both the Intel and ARM64 images, which is actually very useful because I never had to um, even install Redis or MySQL on the M1. I just created a Docker compose file, do a Docker compose, and then run that, and it just pulled the images and runs it. So, which is one of the philosophies I think that we should talk about again in the future when we have future meetups, is not to install server server stuff on your work machine. Just run Docker, and then at least now uh, you can easily remove things or like change things without having to wipe your whole system a lot. It just makes your system a lot more stable. If you run, for example, MySQL or Postgres or Redis or whatever as a Docker image, as a Docker service. So yeah, the Docker technical preview is quite powerful. It's not stable, they say, but I haven't really encountered any issues there. But yeah, it's this is one of the things that I use at work, and I was happy that I was able to get running. Yeah, so I've been using this full time for work, and those are the biggest issues I think that I faced.
That was really nice, very insightful as well. Like, thanks for sharing Docker at the end. I forgot about it, but since you brought it up, it's like wow, it's cool, right? You can run both architecture images.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't think we have any questions, so I guess we can move on to GUI.
Okay. Let me. Maybe I can share this screen. To share. Okay. Can you see the screen? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. So I'll be sharing about Ruby static type. So in Ruby 3, there's one significant features coming with Ruby 3 is that they introduce static types. I think Max has been talking about static types a few years ago. So it's been in progress for a very long time. So what's static type? So static type languages normally are suitable for larger projects. So namely like Java, C++, or C. So those are, I think, those are the popular ones. And dynamically typed language allows for rapid development. But when you deal with larger teams and bigger code base, then you will start to have difficulties on that. So over the years, there are also multiple programming languages that adopt static type, namely like Python, PHP. They have their own static type ways of doing things, and also some tools. And one of the popular ones is TypeScript. Then it's like a separate branch of JavaScript where you need to compile again to become like runnable JavaScript. So I think for those who practice JavaScript, you know TypeScript quite well, right? So what's for Ruby then? So let's click on this. So for Ruby, Ruby 3 introduced RBS. So it's not new, I would say. So RBS is like a signature file for Ruby script or programs. You can say like if in terms of C and C++, it's like the header file. So normally when you see a code base of C and C++, you have something .h. So those are the header files. For RBS, is similar to those. So it creates a signature of your Ruby code. So it doesn't override or change your Ruby code completely. It's just a separate file to identify what your methods, what your scripts are used for. So if you look at here, so this is a small example of RBS file. Let me see whether you can see properly. Okay. So you can see there's a class, and then how you define it, initialize it. So when you define an input, what's type the input, right? So defining input is similar to like this. So these are inputs. You can see it's using a union. So if you see this symbol, is actually or. So you can use either type and a string type. And this is how you define the input parameters for static type. So it will end in a void. So for return values, you will see something like this. So there will be an arrow, and then here is the return value, right? So to install RBS, you just need to install RBS. That's pretty much it. So let's go back to here, slides. So there's two types of Ruby static type, right? There's two school of thought. One is RBS, one is RBI. So RBS started in Square. So there's a company called Square Payment Gateway. or payment company. And another one is Shopify, so Sorbet. So both of them, both of this framework, it shouldn't be same framework. Both of these two are used for static type for Ruby. So let's see here. So this is Steep. Steep is developed in Square. So when you create, so you just need to install like gen install Steep, then you're able to use Steep. For declaration, the RPS file is ended with RPS, and then it normally stored in the signature directory. So it's similar from what you see just now, the RPS library from the official Ruby, right? So and then you can use Steep to check against your signature. So if you write your class and then it's different from what you define in the signature, you throw an error saying, okay, this is not supposed to be there, or it's not implemented yet. So it serves as a checkpoint for you to check the code, and also a documentation for people don't have to read through all your Ruby code to know what's the behavior, right? You just need to look at the signature, you know what type of the return value will be, right? So this is Steep. Then let's see Sorbet. So for Sorbet, it's I would say it's much more mature because it started very early on when TypeScript first, I would say on the early days when people talk about TypeScript in not TypeScript, static type in Ruby. So so for RBS, RBI, so Sorbet generate RBI. So this is the simple class that Sorbet generate, right? So let's see on RBI files. So this RBI. So you can see here. So for all RBI and RBS, the syntax being used are fully Ruby syntax. So it won't cause an error because all of those are just Ruby, pure Ruby syntax. And then for RBI, it will just be an empty body. But when you run with Ruby, it won't fail. It won't throw error. Let me see what's here. I remember that stuff I need to mention here. Then my data will check again. So for RBS and RBI, there isn't a transition, a full transition tools right now. But I would say that Sorbet is trying to get trying to bridge the difference between both, so that you can convert RBS to RBI, RBI to RBS. So this is their work currently. So if you look at here, for RBS, it doesn't do abstract class or final class or module final struct. RBI does. So there's a differences on what RBS can do and RBI can do on in terms of declaration, right, and members. So you can check that out. It's on the Shopify GitHub, so that you can decide which type of tools that's suitable for you for doing static type in Ruby, right? So for static type Ruby, there's also two tools that you can use to generate the signature. Rather than you writing your own signature, you can generate it on the fly, right? So that's one called typeprof. It released along with Ruby 3. So I would say that it's still experimental. Yeah, experimental type Ruby interpreter. So when you write a Ruby code, you just run it with typeprof, then it will generate the signature. Basically, this is the RBS signature that you can use. It doesn't fully support all the Ruby stuff yet, so if you want to try it out, feel free. And I would say that this is one of the good effort, so that you don't have to write and then it generates signature files RBS for you. For Sorbet, there's a tool called Tapioca. So for Tapioca, it's quite stable. It's the tool for Ruby programmers to generate their RBI files. So when you do, so it's similar. You just need to install. To generate, you just need to do Tapioca and then generate. You can specify what type of files that you want to generate on. So you can generate from gems, generate from dynamic methods. So yeah, you can check out this for generating RBI. So what makes static type possible in Ruby? So that's two features in Ruby. Namely, first one is duck typing. So let me see whether I can share the code. Go through first. So duck typing and non-uniformity return. So duck typing in static type Ruby, we use interface, and then for non-uniformity return, we use union. So let's see the code, whether I can show the code. Is it possible? Yeah. Okay, cool. So for interface, right? So from here, you can see that it's much more clean if you use interface, because for duck typing, it doesn't go far into how to say the type of returns. Yeah, but when you use interface, it's very strict on what is being passed and what is being returned. So this is one of the better ways of doing static type Ruby from duck typing, right? Another one is union. So remember this symbol, the pipe symbol. So for Ruby, you can in a method you can return multiple types. You can return a string, you can return a boolean, you can return a class, but it won't be how to say, it won't be straightforward or clear if you need to read through the whole code, the whole method, to know what's exactly will be returned. So it's better to have a signature that shows that what are the expected type that it will return, right? So when you use that method, you will be much more confident on what are the return values, so that it won't screw up your calling methods in Ruby. Let's go back. So this is, I think, is the final wrap up for why static type in Ruby. First is to find bugs. So if you have a large code base, if a bug happens, you need to pinpoint where does the bug actually happen, right? So if you have a static type signature, you can go through the signature files and pinpoint which blocks actually causing that issue. or you can run the signature file against your Ruby files so that you find out, okay, this method actually using the wrong input or pushing out the wrong output. Because once you runs it, it will immediately tell you which functions causing the error. Another one is new safety, because sometimes in Ruby file, it can just not return anything, or something happen, it just not return anything. So if you have a signature file like RBS or RBI, you know exactly when that happened, right? Whether that will happen or anything that's related to it. It's easier to pinpoint a scope rather than go reading through all your Ruby files and finding the errors everywhere, right? Next thing is better IDE integration. So with the signature, when you open your projects, it will look at those signature file and it will index, right? So if you use any IDE like Visual Code, Atom, or I think RubyMine, so all those IDE will require some files, right? Initial files to identify what type of projects of your Ruby um, code. So this signature file will really helps when you do search or you do relation pointing. So when you click a method, you go back to the definition. So all this are very important in terms of tracing or indexing all the methods for your program. Number four is guided duck typing. So when you define an interface or RBS or RBI files, you are how to say, you are restricted or limited to that scope. Means which type of parameter you should be passing in, which type of variable you should expect it from outputting from that method. So you don't have to think whether anyone is using this method differently or regression wise, right? Because everything is specified in the RBI and RBS file. So you just need to look at it and write your Ruby code using duck typing according to the definition that you define, right? So that it's consistent. It doesn't cause regression or future problems. So those are the benefits, references. So all these are the references that I use when I prepare this material. So this session is not in depth on static types for Ruby, but it's introduction, means I give you some starting point where you can look for. So there's sorbet, there's steep, you can look into tapioca and taprof. So for official Ruby 3, it's actually based on steep and taprof. For sorbet and tapioca, those are, I would consider, third party, similar to what we have in like RSpec and Minitest. Both are different, but it maintained differently. So it depends what you like or what you are interested in. But both are, I would say, quite good in terms of what it's supposed to do. Yeah. If you have any question, yeah, just comments in Facebook or YouTube. I will happy to answer those. Hello.
Yep. We don't see any questions so far. I don't really have much question as well because I don't have experience in this. And yeah, I roughly know what you talked about, like the steep and sorbet. So yeah. Tristan, do you have any questions?
I do, yeah. Do you know why they decided on optional typing, because this is optional, right? It will still run even if you like it's not fully typed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not enforced because I think a lot of people still like the dynamic way
Yeah,
of
but
doing it.
why is it like, for example, I think there's, I forgot which one, but if you enable static typing on a file, then the whole file needs to be statically typed. I think it's flow or something. I forgot, but something like,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's TypeScript, where if you say it's TypeScript, then everything should be TypeScript. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
another
that's good.
way
Yes,
of optional thing, right? Uh,
correct.
but this one is, it's just really everything is optional. You can type it or not. Do you know why
Yep.
you would do that?
So I would say that Ruby is still in transition. So there's a lot of interest on static type, but not everyone is buying in. Sorbet started in Shopify, but not
Mhm.
every code base in Shopify is using Sorbet. So there's certain teams are using Sorbet, including Steep, like Square. They are not using the whole company code base is static type. Only a few teams are using those. Um, I would say it wants to maintain the flexibility where Ruby doesn't enforce things directly to you, and it's still backward compatible. So you can still run, I think Ruby 1.9.3.
Is there any speed benefit for adding typing?
I would say documentation because
No speed
when you
benefit yet. No performance benefit. It's just really documentation and soft stuff.
Yeah, I didn't see much performance side stuff. No, it's just signature. It's just extra signature like the header file for C. It's I think it's more development
Mhm.
productivity side of things. So when you search a method, you immediately know what type of output it should behave.
And
Like
I guess it's like a unit test for your thing as well. Like basically, anytime you call this method, then you know these are the parameters because you've typed it to be these parameters. So like you don't need to do a unit test that, okay, if you call this without a parameter, how does this behave? Because basically, if you say it's going to be, it should be part of it, then it won't even well, when you run the static analyzer, then it's not even going to pass that, right?
mhm. Yeah, it's more on I think when the code base getting larger because not everyone can keep track of what file, what methods, what input. This will be helpful because it's just one command and run, so it saves a lot of time. Rather than you need to go through and check, or is this method being declared before? Um, and for Ruby code, you can return multiple class or type right in the method. So this will enforce that using union or not union. It definitely solves some headache when you try to debug or adding new feature on top of a larger code.
Yeah, that's interesting of returning a union, because that's also how Crystal does multiple return types. Because Crystal is Ruby-like, except that it's fully typed. I don't know if you listened to some of my presentations on Crystal, but
Mhm.
like for example, if you can return an int or an integer or a string for a method in Crystal, then your type signature should be a union of integer and string, and it actually checks whether the return value is either a string or an integer. And it's interesting that the type systems that Ruby is using is also getting inspiration from Crystal, who got its original inspiration from Ruby. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like the
I think
Ruby
it's
influence ecosystem is
almost the
getting.
same developers around the Ruby community when they contribute this idea. It's still very new, I would say. For Steep, Steep is I don't think there's popularity around Steep, but Sorbet, yes, Sorbet is quite mature, I would say. But yeah, it's not included in Ruby
But the
3.
problem is Sorbet is not officially part of Ruby, right? Unlike
Yeah, it's
the
not.
RBI. RBI is officially part of Ruby. So here's that's the problem, right? You'll have I don't know, is Minitest still part of Ruby, or is it
Yes,
spun out
I
of its
remember.
own?
Yes, Minitest because when you install Ruby, it comes with Minitest.
Well, I don't know about 3, because I think a lot of things have been spun off into gems instead of
Oh,
like baked in. Like for example, what's the web server? That web server, the default web server in Ruby now is a gem. So I maybe this becomes like that as well because you have mini test, but everyone is using RSpec anyway, and so now mini. I don't know if mini test is going to be a gem, but or for example, the I forgot that web server that Ruby comes in by default. But now that's a gem, and everyone's using Puma or something, and now you basically have a choice because it's not built into Ruby anymore. So maybe this is the same thing. RBI might be spun off into its own gem, and everyone just settles on RBS as a typing system.
yeah. So it's based on own preference, I would say. Although it's included in the official Ruby tree, but still you can use anything that you like. And Robocop actually implements both Sorbet and RBS, so you can install those extensions in. So when you write your Ruby code, it's automatically checked.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Minitest is part of the Ruby standard library uh, since 1.9.1. And I was talking about WebRick, which is not, I think it's spun off as a gem now. WebRick used to be part of Ruby, or is it still?
I think Ruby 3.
Yeah, it's still
There's
it's
a
part of
new
standard
web
library.
server for Ruby 3, right? I think it's Falcon. Is it Falcon?
I'm not sure. Yeah, but I know WebRick had used to be part of the standard library, and then there was a push by a number of developers to reduce the standard library and then just move some of those into gems, which is good because you want to keep your footprint as small as possible, especially if you're going to do something like something called like the definition, like test coverage, because there are multiple implementations of Ruby, right? And and they depend on the Ruby official test suite to say that this is Ruby, because we don't have an official standard for Ruby. Basically, Ruby is whatever mRuby does, and that's what's called Ruby. And so they depend on the testing suite to say that this particular flavor of Ruby is Ruby because it conforms to the Ruby behavior.
Okay.
So that's why they want to limit the standard library, because if if for example WebRick has a special quirk, then that means all implementations of Ruby need to handle that quirk. But then if it's just a library, then they don't have to do that, and WebRick needs to change basically, or update itself or something.
Mm, okay, makes sense. Yeah, so I think it's still early to say right now for static type Ruby.
Hmm.
But I think a lot of people wanted this, so let's see what is next for Ruby static type. I think most likely will be used for data science or machine learning stuff. Most likely.
Hmm.
Yeah. See you. Any questions around? I think for Rector or the concurrency stuff, we can put it on the next meetup because that would be also interesting.
Do you want me to add your screen share to the stream? I'll add it.
No.
Okay. Oh wait. Oh, sorry.
Or
Okay.
so later, I will be sharing this. I think it's very short. Um,
Hmm.
Most likely all the links here to help people get started.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. So for you, will you use static type on your project?
I don't know yet. I wanted to do TypeScript, but the problem is there's a lot of momentum and inertia on the project on not using typing, so it's quite difficult to get it there. Usually, it's better if the project started with typing from the beginning, and then it's easier to continue on. Introducing typing onto an existing application, I found was quite difficult. because you have it's there's a cascade of effects, right? Like you change this, and then oh, everything that depends on this needs to change because now it has to be typed as well, and then it's just like it's like a virus spreading where everything that it touches needs to be typed, because otherwise it's not going to work. Um, so at least that was my experience with TypeScript. So I don't know about this since this is more of an optional, like a very soft optional typing. So maybe that it will be easier. Like instead of writing some particular unit tests on the call syntax, for example, or the return value, asserting that this return is not nil, for example, because instead of writing a test, you just define that it's not going to be nil as its type because you said type. It's not it's not a union of nil or something else. Then I think that will be easier. But we'll see. Um, it I think maybe in the next few months we might introduce the library as these things get more stable and more people are using it in fresh projects. Then we'll see. Maybe one of the workshops that we can do in Ruby Meetup, we can just do a full application, maybe a to-do application, but fully in either RBS or RBI.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Jeffrey. Is there a practical use for Ruby 3 at the moment, or are we all waiting for Ruby 3.1? I think GitHub is using 3.0 in production already, right? Let me just confirm that. GitHub Ruby.
For Ruby 3, if you are wanted to get performance out of it, it's memory. So auto memory compaction is happening in Ruby 3.
Mhm.
And MJIT thing
Yeah.
is also better.
So basically, what Matt's promised, which is like, I mean, on a various level, that three Ruby 3 will be 3 times faster than 2, is kind of achieved. And so there are a few, except for Rails, I think. Rails
Yeah.
application
Mm-hmm.
benefit fully from the changes, but they are working on making it change like that. But then
Yep.
again, we should be reminded that not all Ruby applications are Rails applications. I still have a lot of scripts that will benefit from here, like random things. Rake tasks, for example, don't necessarily have to hook into Rails for it to be faster, right? Or you can have long running sidekick jobs that does not necessarily work with Rails and that can be also improved. So there are a number of Ruby programs that can benefit that are not necessarily part of Rails.
Yep. Correct. Correct.
So it's always good as well to to use the new paradigms. I think we talked about this on the previous meetup, like the endless if, like sorry, endless def. I think what was that? Or no, the line like single lines that doesn't have an end.
All right, endless method definition. I think,
Yeah,
yeah.
method
And then,
definition.
yep.
Yeah, so for one line, so that kind of makes things nice, look nice. The right assignment would be also
Yeah.
nice,
Trying to
especially
the yeah.
when you're
Correct.
because usually you don't use the underscore anymore, right? Like user dot find three, for example, and then oh okay, I find it now. I need to assign it to a variable, so I can just like user dot find three and then arrow to a variable, and then that makes it a lot easier. So there are a number of conveniences that we can start using aside from the performance benefits. Thanks for asking, Jeffrey. I hope that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Yep. For me, static type. My team is looking into those because our project is new, so
Yeah, I think
they are
static.
using they are using JavaScript on TypeScript, so they want me to use static type for Ruby. Still considering because
But has
we are
has the project already started with Ruby?
yeah.
Have you thought about looking into Crystal?
Not really, because it's based on people that work on the projects. We are lack of people, lack of developer. So
Because you can have I think there are crystal libraries that you
Mm-hmm.
can use for Sidekick. So, for example, if you're doing delay jobs or like Sidekick jobs, you can write your jobs in Crystal, and
Mm-hmm.
everything else can still be in Rails. And then so all of your background jobs basically are automatically typed because Crystal is a typed language, and it's compiled, and it doesn't have to run in the same instance as Rails, so it can be very fast. And so you can like
Okay.
your background processing can be in a separate language, because what's great about Sidekick is that you have a job definition on Redis, right? And
Yeah.
basically any any library that understands a job definition can hook onto that Redis queue and then pick jobs and then do something, and then everything still works. So you can have, for example, a Go program that picks off jobs from the Redis queue, a Sidekick job from Redis queue. It understands the Sidekick job definition, and it nobody will know that it's a Go program. It just knows that it's a worker. So you can have a mix of different languages, different frameworks that pick off job definitions from the Redis queue. This is actually very, very nice.
Yeah, that will be interesting also. So for now, it's very clean Ruby because we haven't looked into scalability and also stuff yet. But yeah,
Mm,
it's depends on time. If
yeah.
there will be enough time, yes, that will be one of the things to try.
Hmm.
Um, Anything else to see? Let's see. Questions. Okay.
I don't see a number of questions. No.
So for Rails, I think Rails will wait for 3.1, right? Because 3.0 is not reaching that standard yet.
No, I don't know what Rails will wait for, but 6.1, as you've seen when I was presenting, right? 6.1 was already working on 3.0. But whether it makes use of things, because I remember Rails used to, um, what was that? The something about a hash thing. They had their own implementation, and Ruby did the implementation in Ruby itself, and so they
Mhm.
moved all of the extra hash thing would be to the default Ruby, and then they had to bump the Ruby requirement. So it can be the same, where some of the things that they re-implemented in Rails would be in Ruby. I think it's the optional, the ampersand. What is this? The lonely operator. I think that was
Ah,
it. Where you have a try, right? Dot try, and then some of the things were re-implemented using the optional method. The nillable. I forgot what they call it. It's the lonely operator, the ampersand dot
Safe operator, right? The episode. Yeah.
safe operator. Hmm.
yeah, from what I heard is they try to make use of the rector because that's the new concurrency way of
Hmm.
doing things, right? Rather than using threads, they use rector to optimize running on multiple cores. So
Hmm.
that will be implemented into Rails.
That would be cool. Like looking forward to that, because that seems to be like the bottleneck for Rails in terms of scaling. Usually, it would scale the web server, right? The like you just produce as many threads or as many processes to scale, and then it's all a single use thing. But once you have like this become this, I think this one is inspired by Elixir, where you have like multiple small actors that does things
Mm.
long lived. And so the key point here is that they should be long lived, and then that you make use of all of that JIT. So the thing about the JIT is you only benefit from the compilation if it's reused a second time or the third time or something, right? Otherwise, you don't want to compile. You just want to parse it, and then if you're going to throw away the compiled version and then use it and then clear it for another request anyway. And so that, I guess, that was the problem that they were having. And if they use vectors, most likely that will be long lived. JIT will be more useful in that case, because if some parts of a code transaction is jitted, like isn't compiled, then if it's rerun again, then that code is still compiled, and then the second time it runs is already going to be faster. So
Okay.
if requests can be shared. And of course, the problem there is like when you start sharing requests, that's when attack vectors come in, because now you actually get to reuse the same request, right? For the same code that ran the request, and you can
Yeah.
always like
I
get
also
some.
read that if using Rector, it there's one downside because it doesn't want to access global variables. So for Rails, it relies a lot on
Yeah,
global variables because you define the output. But if you use Rector, it's like sandbox, it's independent.
that's the same issue that Elixir had, and of course, the way they do it is they don't have global variables per se, but they work around it by considering an actor as a global thing, and then everyone just talks to that actor. So basically, it's like a singleton object. It's not a global variable, but technically it is. So there are ways around it. Again, I probably inspired by Elixir and how they do things with the, because in Elixir it's a hard requirement that everything is partitioned off just because of how Erlang does it.
Okay.
Jeffrey is asking, or well, suggesting it will be more interesting to see more discussions of Crystal versus Ruby.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's been some time since we talked about
Yeah.
Crystal. I think I'm the only one who's actually doing some presentations on Crystal, but we'll see again. Like I'll try to try out some of the web frameworks and stuff on Crystal. Maybe GUI, you can try out Crystal as well. It's quite interesting. They haven't been as active as I would like. I haven't really heard a lot about changes in Crystal, most likely because Python is the cream, the flavor of the year in 2020. Or maybe there was nothing happening in 2020, that's why. But at least in 2019, Python was the thing, right? But hopefully in 2021, we'll see more of these offshoots because again, 3.0, the typing system is reminds me very, very much of how Crystal is doing things.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that would be good. See anything else?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Next meetup. So will be the same, right?
Yes. I think we're done GUI, right?
Um, I, s-
Oh yeah,
I
next
have a quick talk to give, but I could
Okay.
like move it to
Sure.
the next quick.
Yeah.
next week.
No, no. You can. How long will it be?
Almost 10 minutes. It's just sharing like something I learned regarding Rails
Yeah,
time
I think
zone.
that
So
it will be best if you do it now as well, and then we still have like 15 minutes until 9.
all right. Anyway, we schedule it to 9:30, right? So
Okay.
right. Fun with Rails time zone. Let me move my stuff around. Okay. Oops. Right. Hey everybody. Gui here. So I'm a Rails software engineer, and you can find me as Close to the Human in more social media. So I'm sharing like things I learned about Rails time zone from a scenario I'm working on in my like learning project. Right. So imagine like given a list of tweets that you've liked. Right. I want to be able to get the user's time zone. So what I'm doing is basically getting a list of the users like tweets and then showing back to them on today. For example, like 5th of January, what are the tweets that you like that was created today? So that's kind of like the scenario I was going for in my learning project. Right? So I want to get the user's time zone, so I know that okay, they could be like in America right now, and it's like still maybe not, but it could be a day difference, right? Depending on which time zone you are, either 4th or 5th of January, or even right now could be 6th of January already. And I want to use that time zone, knowing where they are, to query for the like tweets. So I do store like the links and the IDs of the like tweets. And then from there, I will display back to the user their local time zone. So, yep. Let's talk a bit about some Rails default behavior on how Rails by default handles time, right? So a lot of time related classes actually falls under active support. Let me show it here. Like for example, time zone, time, all this actually falls under active support. So if you look at like the Ruby on Rails API documents, right, time zone falls under active support. By default, active record stores all dates in UTC without time zone. So this is like a fresh Rails DB connected to Postgres. This is actually Postgres. So I created like 3 columns: ID for the tweet ID, URI for the URL for the tweet, as well as date. So by default, just using date, it stores it as timestamp without time zone. So this is the default behavior in Rails. So it will still do that even if config.timezone is set. So config.timezone, quickly show it. It's basically a configuration you can set inside your application.rb on what time zone should the application default to. There's a few levels, a few layers there, but we can talk about it once we reach there. Actually, there's a way to change the time zone that active record stores date. Right. To do that, you can actually set config active record default time zone. So let me show. So all these are actually available in the Ruby on Rails documentation or API page. So let's see, where is it? Right. Config active record default time zone. So it always uses UTC by default, but you can change it to local, or you can change it to some other time zone depending on that. If you have set local already, you can just set it to local. So you will use whatever time zone is set in local. See. Oops. Okay, let's talk about the time class, right? So time.now always refers to server time. So when I say server time, it means the server that is hosting the application. It doesn't necessarily mean the config.time zone that you have set. So you have to break it up into 3 layers. One is the server time itself, and then the application, which is Rails, right? Rails time. And then whatever time zone you specify later. So kind of have to think in these 3 layers. We saw earlier that Postgres has its own behavior as well, which is not necessarily affected by application or Rails configuration. Time now always refers to server time. So time.zone.whatever is always time zone sensitive, right? And if when you use that, there's no specified time zone, it will consult config.time zone to see that if a time zone is set. Right? So if you do, for example, time.current, it returns time zone now, which is time zone sensitive, right? Or if the config time zone is set, it will use that. Otherwise, it will just return time.now. So everything follows kind of that layer of stack, right? If on the application is nothing configured, or is configured in UTC, you'll take that. If not, it just fall back to on a server level application. Okay, so coming back to the scenario I mentioned earlier, right? Just to rehash, I want to get a user's time zone. I want to use that time zone to query whatever tweets they like on that day, and I want to display that using their local time zone, local time as well, right? For the tweets. So kind of breaking this down into 3 problems, right? How do I get the user's time zone? I need to perform a query that is time zone sensitive, and I need to display back to the user on the front end with their time zone. So I solved the easy part first, which is displaying the local time on their time zone. So after doing some searching around, I found this gem called local time, which is actually by Basecamp, and this is quite nice, where you can use it to like format what you want to display. It works with IRB, and there's a lot, ERB, and there's a lot of helpers that's very, very useful, right? For example, you want to show like a second ago, how long ago, and different formats. So this is quite kind of nice. One, I guess, additional tip I could talk about is if you're using this on Rails 6 with Webpacker, there is like an open PR that goes through what you need to do for Rails 6 with Webpacker. So if you're using Rails 6, kind of follow that, because the README didn't actually work for Rails 6. Let's see. Okay, so that's displaying the time locally to the user. Next is getting the user's time zone. So again, I did a search around regarding gems, and I found this browser time zone Rails. Unfortunately, I don't know why I followed the README. It didn't work for me. Again, I'm not sure, is it a Rails 6 problem or Is it a me problem? So what I ended doing was I use alternate way where I write some very simple JavaScript and get the time zone from the browser. So and then store it in the cookie, and then I'll read that cookie in Rails. So just to like demo. So there is this very simple JavaScript that you can get, and it will show like the time zones. And this time zone is compatible on Rails site as well. Let's see if I can, because I think Rails has a list of, I don't have it here right now, but they do have a list of, yes, here is it. There's a mapping of time zones they have on Rails. So whatever is showed there is compatible with this. So that's not, you don't have to do a lot of things. Yep, so that's for getting the user's time zone. Now, as I mentioned earlier, with all that, I want to do a time-sensitive query, right? Because as we see, active record by default stores everything in UTC without time zone. And what I wanted to do was, the query is a bit convoluted because I still haven't figured out a good way to do it yet. But basically what I'm doing is, right, given the day, for example, 5th of January, search for every tweet that is available for 5th of January by this user. So this is what I'm getting. So the main thing I want to highlight is you can use time use zone if you want to switch to a specific time zone. So for example, here you see that I'm getting the time zone from cookies. And then from there, I will use time use zone to switch to that time zone and then perform the query. So with time zone now, it's time zone sensitive. So it knows how to handle the transformation. Let's see. Right. I guess that's pretty much the end of my talk. Right? If you have any questions about time zones, feel free to ask. I'm not an expert, but at least I can share some things I did learn through my research. But one thing I want to end this as a key takeaway is a summary of do and don'ts with time zone. So I took this from one of the ThoughtBot blog posts when I was doing all this research about time, because I actually did encounter an issue before I was learning like to use time use zone on. Somehow every query that I hit Rails with keeps switching time zones, because I was trying like, okay, what if this user is in KL and what if this user is in Pacific PST? I was like switching the time, and then after a while, it didn't know how to handle. Like there was something funky going on that even though I set it as like Kuala Lumpur, it's sending PST time back to me. So yeah, so from there I kind of learned, right, you kind of always want to use like time.current, time.zone, whatever is time zone sensitive. So that will be very, very helpful. Or not, like I say, it might fall through the stack and might rely back on server time, depending on what's your use case. References for all the links. I'll be posting this up later. So if anyone like want to refer, it's all there. But yeah, I'm curious how everybody handles time zones. Like maybe the way I'm doing it is not the best way. But it's kind of the way I learned how to, right? But if anyone has like better tips or anything, do share it at the Ruby MI Slack. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks.
All right. And I just had a question on, because this one is great if you have Rails rendering the view. And what I've had problems with time zones is when I need to send it through an API, and now you have like the browser thing changing things around, right? Like date dot new on the JavaScript is basically UTC but shifted on a particular time zone or something. So it becomes very complicated when you have ranges and you shuttle information back and forth to the server, back to the client. Then things get shifted 8 hours in my case when we were debugging it. So did you encounter any of these issues, for example?
No, because my use case was very specific in a sense that I used the local time gem to handle everything, because I was using ERB to display it, right? I wasn't using any API. It's really Rails just handling all the view. So yeah, that's why I wouldn't experience that.
Okay. Yep, good. Sounds like an interesting thing. I think that's just the tip of the iceberg on time zones. I'm sure you'll have more adventures with time zones, the more you play around with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't
And
know it would be like such a deep, not deep, but I had to do some research on like why is it behaving so erratically.
and you mentioned Slack, so we are on Slack. I think we're also on Discord that we don't really use so much.
Yeah, it's only
Oh,
when we use it for code clinic. That's
yeah.
only like the
So
main thing.
Jeffrey has this comment, and I'd like to also plus one this because there are cases where a user would like to would like to show their time, not just the local time zone wherever they are, whatever the browser's client reports as, but on an actual particular time zone, right? Like like show it in New York, for example, because the accounting stuff happens in New York, even though I'm remotely working in Bali, right? So I need all of my dates to be in New York. Let's say it's an accounting package, and I think this is how we usually do it. Is it's still saving UTC, but the time zone. I think we post this a code which is not properly formatted here in StreamYard, so we can't really show it, but you can set the time zone that is displayed depending on their user setting, for example, because you basically like ask for their time zone, or at least set the default time zone, which is usually UTC 0 or whatever. Like if it's Kuala Lumpur based application is UTC+8, and then allow them to send the time zone whenever they want.
Actually,
Yeah,
there
does
was
that
a lot of yeah. When I was like researching, a lot of suggestions came up like what the code that Jeffrey shared is right everywhere. If you look for like time zones related, but my use case was I want to store like very minimal information, and it's like social media. So I was like, I don't think it's that important anyway. But yeah, yes, this is kind of like what a lot of people suggested. So I assume a lot of people are using it in some capacity as well.
Mhm. Okay, so you did mention Slack. We do have Discord, but we don't really chat there as much. And our community is also on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, but we don't really use that much because we only use it well, supposedly for StreamYard, so that we don't have to log into my account. Because right now StreamYard is tied to my account, but eventually we'll fix that. What other social media presences do we have? Then so that people can contact you if they have questions, for example.
I think
YouTube,
meet up.
comment on the
Yeah,
video.
YouTube comment. Like Facebook definitely. YouTube. I think
Yeah,
I'm most active in Slack. So
yeah,
yeah.
mostly Slack then. Just if you have any more questions, or you'd like to talk more about like Ruby on M1, or not just Ruby. Ruby again, like in the previous presentation, Ruby works like well in on like if we're just talking about Ruby, but if we're talking about the ecosystem, then there is a bit of work that we need to do. So if you have any questions on that, and if you're still deciding whether you should get an M1 and you'd like to hear about from someone who is already using M1 um, at work, like for work tasks, then hit me up also on Slack. I'll be there and I can answer your questions.
Yep. I'll quickly share the link in the comments.
Yeah, we also have some people sharing on Facebook, so that would be nice. If you have questions there, you can also see it.
Yep.
If you are watching this on YouTube and you somehow are not at Slack, then just go to this bit.ly link, bit.ly/RubyMySlack, and yeah, you get yourself invited.
Oops. Right. I guess that's kind of it. I kind of want to wrap up with one thing. I guess
Hmm.
because I've been thinking about like, oh, it's a new year, right? I'm like searching for new Ruby learning materials. I'm thinking whether do I want to get like the Ruby under a microscope, but that's like a very old Ruby version. If I'm not sure is it still relevant, but a lot of people cite the book. So I guess kind of curious, like, do you all have any plans for like new learning materials or any suggestions? People out there interested in like furthering their knowledge in Ruby.
Probably stuff on the scientific front. So it's probably less than on the language except for the new ones because we've been doing like working on it like almost every day. So it's a natural language for us. But most of the ecosystem around things that we're not doing. That's so basically something that's not web, and also learning more about mruby. So basically compiling Ruby because mruby is a compiled well basically compile mruby into another program. So those are things that I'd like to learn more as well this year.
Mm-hmm. For me, it would be there's a Ruby on Rails tutorial on Free Code Camp. They released it not long ago, which is good. The full Ruby on Rails stuff. For me, I would be interested in looking into data science stuff and concurrency. So most likely running on JVM. Yeah,
Hmm.
Ruby on JVM.
Oh, JRuby, that'll be interesting. That'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we can wrap up then.
Mhm.
Thanks everyone who's watching. Thanks Tristan and Gui. So we'll be back next. Hold on, let me move my slides. Right, we'll be back next month again. Usual time, same Tuesday. I don't think it coincides with any events, so we'll definitely be around. All right, thank you everybody.